In the winter evening of January 23rd, 1977, in Moscow, a young man named Alexei Chikin was engrossed in reading a book in his apartment. Suddenly, the phone rang. On the other end of the line was Alexei's father, who whispered, "Come quickly, it seems someone wants to take my life." Alexei hurriedly dressed and rushed out of his apartment. The journey to his father's house took 2 hours. When he arrived, he found the door to his father's apartment slightly ajar, and his father lying in the hallway. His father was no longer breathing, and there were bloodstains around. Soon, the investigative team arrived at the scene. Unexpectedly, a young woman appeared at the apartment door. She looked puzzled at the officers and inquired about what was happening. When asked who she was, her brief response shocked Alexei. She was his father's wife. Boris, Alexei's father, was 70 years old, and he had never told his son that he was married to a young woman. How could this be? The woman casually mentioned that she was registered in the apartment and planned to stay there one. Meanwhile, experts and detectives tried to reconstruct the crime scene. Everything appeared to be a domestic quarrel amid alcohol consumption. Empty bottles were scattered throughout the kitchen, and an unfinished vodka bottle with 2 shot glasses stood on the table. Next to Boris's body lay a kitchen knife, the murder weapon. However, one detail didn't fit this picture. Boris had called his son, warning him of danger. How did he know about it if it was a sudden argument? Detectives focused on a bottle of Jubilee cognac. This expensive brand seemed out of reach for an ordinary pensioner who drank. Could the perpetrator have brought it? Fingerprints were found on the cognac bottle, but not on the knife, suggesting the killer wiped the handle carefully. The prime suspect was Elena Chikina, Boris's young wife. However, she had an alibi. She had been at a beauty salon for cosmetic procedures all evening, confirmed by several witnesses. They began investigating the small circle of Boris Chikin's acquaintances, and almost immediately, a certain Andrei Smirnov caught the detectives' attention. Smirnov was an ordinary worker at the boiler room and occasionally enjoyed a drink. He and Boris Chikin had previously quarreled and even had a physical altercation. Moreover, fingerprints matching Smirnov's were found on the expensive cognac bottle. He was apprehended, but he vehemently claimed his innocence. However, law enforcement can be persuasive, and soon Smirnov confessed to committing the crime. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Unfortunately, he never left prison due to a heart attack. It seemed that the case was solved, and Alexei Chikin gradually came to terms with his father's death, returning to his normal life. However, a few weeks later, Alexei decided to visit his father's former apartment, talk to the widow, and retrieve school albums and other mementos. To his surprise, a stranger answered the door. This person claimed to have just moved in through an exchange. Alexei realized that his father had fallen victim to fraudsters. He demanded that the case be reopened, but the authorities refused, citing lack of evidence. In the spring of 1977, a young woman approached the police. She introduced herself as Elena Yezhova and reported that her husband, Anatoly Yezhov, had disappeared and hadn't been seen for 3 days. On the day of his disappearance, someone called him on the phone and arranged a meeting. Anatoly left and never returned. The police initiated a search for the man, who was a distinguished scientist, but their efforts yielded no results. Anatoly was declared missing. The story might have ended there if, a few months later, detectives hadn't visited his wife for some formal reason. To their surprise, a stranger answered the door. He introduced himself as Ivan Chikan and claimed that Elena was his wife. They had recently married, and although Elena had been missing for a month, she had legally registered him as a resident in their apartment. Detectives grew suspicious. How could Elena have registered another man as her husband while Anatoly was missing? And why hadn't Ivan reported Elena's disappearance to the police? Law enforcement officials soon discovered that Elena had obtained a death certificate for her husband and submitted it to government authorities. The investigation revealed that the certificate was skillfully forged. There was no doubt in the detectives' minds Elena was a fraudster. But what was the essence of this scheme? They decided to put pressure on Ivan Chikan. They informed him that Elena Yashova had married him unlawfully, rendering their marriage invalid, and their registered residence in the apartment would be declared void. A distraught Chechen confessed he was from out of town and had found a middleman who promised him Moscow registration and an apartment for a hefty sum. They staged a fictitious wedding and registered him. Afterward, his wife Elena and the middleman disappeared without a trace. The detectives puzzled over how to find Elena and the elusive middleman. It was clear that these two would continue their schemes. Nikolai Sitin worked as a warehouse manager, owned a spacious corporate apartment in Moscow, and had no complaints about life. However, he was lonely, and by the time he reached 50, he longed for a family. One day he met Elena, a young, beautiful woman who instantly captivated him. To his surprise, she reciprocated, and within a month, they celebrated a lively wedding. Elena was from out of town, but that didn't bother Nikolai. He quickly registered her in his apartment. Perhaps he suspected that her attraction to him was partly due to material benefits, but what did it matter? The important thing was that she was with him. However, a month later, his young wife reported him missing to the police. They searched for him unsuccessfully until fate intervened. Children playing in an abandoned cemetery near Moscow stumbled upon a fresh grave. Clever kids informed the local officer, who decided to investigate. To his astonishment, he found a body, clearly someone who hadn't died of natural causes. In their efforts to identify the deceased, the suburban officers reached out to their colleagues in the capital. After reviewing missing persons reports from the past week, they discovered that the body belonged to Nikolai Sitin. After questioning neighbors, it was revealed that Sitin was a remarkable man. However, his young wife was unfaithful, and she had been seen with a man who arrived in an ambulance. Could this couple have gotten rid of an unwanted husband? It's a plausible motive. Surveillance was placed on Elena Sitina, and the next day her admirer appeared. Detectives immediately began tracking him, uncovering his identity: Valery Tam, an ambulance station driver with a prior criminal record. Intuition guided the investigators. This couple was involved in Nikolai Sitin's demise. Several days of observation yielded crucial information. Valery Tam maintained friendly relations with Konstantin Lenkov, a real estate black market dealer. Surveillance continued for both, but an unexpected twist occurred. Operatives witnessed two individuals approach Tam, grab them by the arms, place them in a car, and drive away. The surprise dissipated when they learned that both Tam and Lenkov had been apprehended by undercover agents who had been monitoring them for some time. Furthermore, Elena, who seemed to have sensed the surveillance, managed to evade the operatives, deceiving them. Tam and Lenkov refused to cooperate with the investigation, but the detectives concluded that this group had repeatedly committed such crimes. They delved into recent cases with similar stylistic patterns. Their attention was drawn to the disappearance of scientist Anatoly Yashov and the equally inexplicable vanishing of his wife. When they showed photos to Ivan Chikan, he recognized both Elena and Lenkov. She had been his fictitious wife, and Lenkov acted as the intermediary who helped him register in the missing scientist's apartment. And so, the second case unfolded. Tam remained silent, but they managed to crack Lenkov. He revealed everything he knew and provided a lead on Alina's possible whereabouts in Smolensk, her hometown. Back then, computers, automated databases, and other modern innovations were absent, making it easy to imagine the colossal effort law enforcement put into identifying Alina's real name, her current location, and ultimately apprehending her. As it turned out, her name was Alina Nekrasova, 34 years old. Interestingly, she had once been a student at Moscow State University, although she never completed her studies. After Alina's arrest, Tam also stopped resisting and began cooperating. He confessed that he had been the hired assassin responsible for the deaths of Nikolai Sitin and Anatoly Yezhov. He was also involved in Boris Chikin's demise. Tam had shared expensive Kogak with Chikin and Smirnov, knowing that the bottle would attract the attention of the police, who would find Smirnov's fingerprints on it. Later, he expelled the intoxicated Smirnov, disposed of Chikin, and left an unfinished vodka bottle and 2 shot glasses on the table. It seemed like an ordinary domestic situation, and the detectives didn't delve too deeply into the investigation. And so it went. However, it became clear that Andrei Smirnov was innocent of Chikin's death. They had planned to release him, but it turned out that Smirnov had been deceased for half a year. Charges were dropped, and he was fully exonerated. Overall, the gang followed a consistent pattern. Nekrasova would find an elderly man, charm him, marry him, then Tam would eliminate him, and Lenkov would find a way to profit from the real estate. Nekrasova would then lose her identity and start anew. 3 episodes were proven, as described in the article, but whether there were more remains unknown. Konstantin Lenkov received a 12-year prison sentence. Valerie Tam faced the harshest punishment, while Elena Nekrasova, who had a penchant for others' property, received 15 years of imprisonment. She emerged from prison no longer young.